Writing. It's part of what we as lawyers do every day. But is it something we really enjoy? Certainly, many attorneys enjoy writing propositions of law and crafting submissions to present to the court. Some may love the use of language and nuance in drafting documents, deeds, or contracts. But what about writing about things other than the law? Welcome back to calawloo, the channel for the modern Caribbean attorney. My name is Jason, and if you're new here, please consider subscribing and turning on the notifications so that you would be alerted every time new content is posted. Today, I'm starting a new series called The Flipside. Many lawyers pursue other passions, either for pleasure or as a side hustle, or maybe even both. Some attorneys have left the profession altogether to focus on other dreams. On the flip side, I will be chatting with lawyers across the Caribbean about these interests and how or if it's influenced by their choice of career. In the first episode of The Flipside, I speak with Ms. Tricia Chin. Tricia Chin is an attorney at law with over 15 years experience in the government sector, with specialist qualifications in contracts, procurement, trade, and finance. She started writing short stories during the pandemic in 2020 for personal use, posting sometimes on Instagram and WhatsApp. She took the step of finalizing and publishing the stories in May 2021. Her book, Tabanca and Other Stories, is now available for purchase on Amazon in a Kindle version, with print copies coming soon to local bookstores. Hi Tricia, and welcome to the Flipside on calawloo.
Hi Jason, thank you for having me.
So about 20 years ago, you made a decision to study law. I want to start off by asking you, why law?
Well, I think I had one of two options. It was either law or economics, and I am very bad at math, so I ended up choosing law, yes.
Did you always consider yourself to be a creative person?
Well, in terms of being creative, in terms of singing, dancing, playing a musical instrument, no, I cannot say that I was ever a creative person. I don't have those creative talents. But I do some baking, and yeah, that's probably the extent of my creativity.
So you started to write short stories. Was there anything that influenced you to do that?
Well, last year during the pandemic, I think I had a fair amount of time on my hands, and my brother probably noticed me with nothing to do, because at some point we had a lockdown, so to speak, and he said, well, why don't you take this time to write about the Camino, because he thought that maybe people would be interested in hearing about someone who is from Trinidad, their experience in walking the Camino de Santiago. So I did think about it, and I started to write a short story, but that short story turned out to be Tabanca, which is the first of my short stories in my little collection. And as you can tell by the name, it's definitely not about the Camino de Santiago, no.
So tell me a little bit more about the Camino de Santiago.
The Camino de Santiago is a pilgrimage. It's a few thousand years old, at least, I think. And the one that I walk, the Camino Frances, it starts from the border between France and Spain, and you walk all the way to Santiago de Compostela, which is supposed to be the resting place for the remains of St. James, who is, as we know, one of the apostles of Jesus Christ. So I would have walked the Camino for 24 days continuously in September of 2010, which was my last month in Europe and the end of my period of study there.
Now, you had the opportunity to study in Europe as part of the Erasmus Mundus program. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, so I studied transnational trade law and finance and Erasmus Mundus. As you know, it was a learning experience which was developed by the European Union to provide for new and different packages of learning, so to speak. So a lot of European universities, they would form consortia and they would come up with these packages of master programs that were different, but which they thought fulfilled a need both in the EU and around the world. So in a group of maybe 24 students in all, there were probably 21 nationalities represented in our program.
So tell me a bit about the stories that you wrote.
The stories that I wrote are fantasy, they are folklore, and of course they are fiction. The stories are set across the 19th century in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, there's no real reference to Tobago, but there's in one of the characters, if you are familiar with folklore, you will recognize her as being part of Tobago's folklore. If you're a history buff, I did fudge some of the timelines, but like I say, it's fiction and it's fantasy and folklore, so it's not supposed to be ideally completely historical.
And you decided to compile these stories into a book. Did you ever see yourself as a published author?
I think maybe in secondary school, when we did have to do creative writing for English language, you do throw around the idea that maybe, I am entertaining people with my creative writing, maybe I should do this. But then you also have that time in secondary school when you're looking at all the other things you could do. You could be a journalist, you could be a historian, you could be an economist, you could be a lawyer. So it was just something that I considered in passing. And no, I did not think that I would ever be a published author of any sort of fantasy, folklore, fiction.
But this is not your first foray into the world of publishing. You have written before on the topic of procurement.
Yes, I do have a published work on procurement, or I had a published work on procurement, and it was available on Amazon Kindle in 2017. And that was largely done to fulfill a need because one of my friends had reached out to me. She was trying to complete her studies and she needed information on public procurement, and she didn't have any that was available to her. So I thought about what I had available and I put it into a format that others could access it for their own use and hopefully encourage any sort of local learning with regards to public procurement. I have, however, unpublished that book from Amazon this year because I was waiting for the regulations. So when I get the regulations, I will complete it and republish the book.
So Tricia, how can people get the book?
You can get my book on Amazon Kindle, and also it will be available in certain local bookstores. I will provide you details for that.
Do you think that it's important for people to have passions outside of their career?
I think you do need areas to relax and areas to escape. And whether those areas are physical activity like running, or maybe you enjoy something else like singing, playing a musical instrument, it is good to encourage yourself to do something different and to see where that can take you, because law is it's a very intellectual profession. And when I say intellectual, I don't necessarily mean that we're all sitting down being Einstein. I mean, we have to use our brain almost all the time, every day. And doing something for pleasure is something that should be encouraged. And I think it actually helps you to focus in your regular, everyday pursuit of law.
What advice would you give to a colleague who may want to try something new?
I would say go for it, so long as it's not immoral or illegal, make it happen. Try something new and see where it leads you. You never know. Time is too short, and you shouldn't let yourself have doubts about what you can and cannot achieve.
Thank you, Tricia, for joining me today on the flip side to talk about your writing.
Thank you very much, Jason. It's been a pleasure being here, and I wish you the best of luck on this series.
And you can download Tabanca and Other Stories from the Amazon Kindle website. The link is in the description below. In this series, I'm looking forward to speaking with several other colleagues about their passions. But what drives you other than your career? Let me know in the comments below. Stay tuned to calawloo, the channel for the modern Caribbean attorney.